Welcome to Lou Palumbo's Between the Lines. Problem solving for our future. Lou. Common sense, logic, and reasoning. Lou. The man that can't stand hate and animus. Lou. Stimulating the thought process of America. Lou. Where being right is not political, it's factual. Lou. Providing real solutions in real time. And now, here's your host, Lou Palumbo.
So I welcome everyone today, and as you are aware, we've been doing this show slightly over a year, the purpose of which is to try to bring some resolution to some problems that are just nagging us on a daily basis. And one might wonder why we're not making headway. Well, that's an interesting question, and here's the answer. Because we lack the will in the media and the elected officials to understand the impact of the words and the language they use. I realize that the media, whether it be Fox or MSNBC or CNN, are, I would just say, in the mode of entertaining you, prepared to say anything to you to garner your attention, which ultimately translates to sponsors, viewership, and their paycheck. They live in a cocoon. I wonder if they've given any serious consideration of the implications of their irresponsible reporting. They even reference themselves as journalists, which is I'm not quite sure that's what they really are, because journalists have some attachment to this concept of responsibility. And I think that if there's one thing we can say about the media is that they become incredibly irresponsible, which is why we don't know what to believe on a day-to-day basis. In any event, we're going to get further into this discussion throughout this podcast because I think that the media requires some oversight, and they have gotten out of control. They control your optic and your narrative, and they are harming the culture, whether they're doing it intentionally or other. If you understand anything about culpability, it doesn't relieve them of responsibility. So I do want to mention again, Phantom Rescue. I encourage everyone to please look into this. It deals with sex trafficking, abductions. Tony Sparks was a former special ops individual who's been contracted by our government from time to time. I'm not going to speak too much into his resume. Let him speak for himself. He's got an interesting background. Frank Smith is the director or head of this operation, and it addresses this problem, which is nationwide, internationally based, driven at times in our families, and even, interestingly enough, on reservations that the indigenous people occupy. I wanted to remind you that it's important that I acknowledge my sponsors, Buzzsprout and Instacart. I happen to use them both. The platform for this production is built off of Buzzsprout. At home, Instacart is great. You just go onto the app and you can pretty much order anything you want to order into your house from a grocery store, for example. And we're going to set aside, some special offers for you. Later we'll get into this a little bit more. Mention my team. What's that, like self-promoting? And so you all know that I'm not doing this by myself. I have seating to my right Gary Spurgeon, who's involved in helping me pull this together. Lloyd Molander, who's in a foreign place. Now, he's in Nevada skiing. He's just taking some time out from his busy ski day to assist us with this. And Ryan Rossell, who does a lot of research for me and lines up a lot of people that have questions and are callers. So I want you to understand this is not just me. This is the concerted effort of many. And with that said in mind, we're going to go to Claire in Chicago. I think Claire is going to call in. Ryan, am I correct in that assumption?
Yes.
If you would be so kind. Hello?
Hello, Lou.
Yes? Is this Claire?
Hi.
How are you?
It is Claire from Wichita. I am good.
From Wichita?
From Wichita.
Oh, Wichita, Kansas.
I have called you before, and we've had a great conversation, and I'm so glad you're taking my call again.
Oh, it's my pleasure, and I intend on having another great conversation with you, Claire. So I appreciate you paying attention and listening to this podcast, because we're trying to take the country in a different direction, independent of the concerted efforts of the criminally insane. But I gather you do have a question.
Well, I do. And I just want to say that your podcast covers so many newsworthy issues. And of course, these days, it's all talk about the atrocities going on in Ukraine and how horrible everything is there. But today, I actually wanted to talk to you about something that's pretty relevant to my family and to millions of families across the country, and yours too, when your kids start getting ready to go to college someday. And that is the idea of test optional. Have you heard of that idea?
Is that in reference to the elimination of the SATs, for example, of the ACTs? Is that what you're referencing?
Exactly.
Yeah,
It's not the elimination of them, but it's colleges and universities are now saying it's not a requirement to submit test scores. It's an optional thing. And it was definitely gaining in popularity before the pandemic, but once the pandemic hit, that idea has completely taken off. And I have a junior in high school, so this is definitely at the forefront of things that we're thinking about. And he recently took the ACT. So we're thinking about, of course we're going to be submitting his test scores, but I'm thinking about all the inequities involved with the testing for colleges. And I think this test optional thing is ultimately a really good idea.
I agree with you, Claire. I think that they should look at the GPA more than the SATs or the ACTs. Some children are just better test takers in this genre than others, number one. I think there's more to the dynamic of children in college and learning than these tests that we've used as a barometer of their learning through, for example, the first 12 years of their education. I am not adverse to the SATs or the ACTs for the purpose of garnering some information regarding the learning experience of our children. But I don't think your college acceptance should be so heavily weighed on or in that area. That's just my own personal feelings. I think if you look at a GPA for a child, and if you see someone's, has got all A's, that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to get a 1600 on the SATs. I'm not saying totally eliminate it from consideration, but I don't think it should ever be a sole source of judgment in determining the acceptance of a child into an academic environment. Conversations about our children today, it's funny you brought up college. I have a concern overall about academic environments today and the indoctrination that's going on in these environments. In fact, if you're following what's going on in Florida, the governor recently passed a bill which basically protects, I believe it's preschoolers, first, second, and third grade children who aren't really ready to process information regarding sex from being taught about sex or having discussions about sex, for example, in the classroom. This whole thing about education is becoming a little blurry. I'm trying to figure out, do the teachers seem to think they have some divine right of influence over your children more so than the parent? That's a question for you, by the way.
Well, that's a really good question. I think so much of that kind of learning should come from the home. However, I do believe that schools and teachers see some of their students don't get that support at home. And so that's where I think it gets really tricky.
Young lady, are you now going to take me down a tangential discussion about failed parenting? Is that what you're trying to do today? Because we could go from one to the other here, Claire. That's the problem with this discussion, because then they all intersect. It's how we get our kids into school, how they're being taught in schools. When children are not excelling, why is that occurring? Is that because of failed parenting? I mean, this is just incredible, the conversations we can have in this country today. But I want to stay on point momentarily before I go off on this tangent about what I was just speaking to. And just, we need to leave the kids alone. Suddenly we've decided to make our children part of the political discussion here. Masks, no masks. Has anyone considered the health implications for these children? Now, I'm not a doctor, Claire. I think you know that. But I'm wondering what time is going to reveal regarding these children wearing masks and rebreathing their CO2, regarding their brain function, its development, and their respiratory system. Not to manage, they're talking about now speech, because you're speaking through a mask. We have gotten so many messages which are mixed in this culture, we don't even know where to start, Claire. And that's partly why
Right.
we're doing this. We're trying to sort through the psychoses to give the public some legitimate and truthful guidance. Maybe we could all do this in unison if we could put our political agendas aside. They start apparently, just to go back to the sex education issue, apparently right around the fourth grade. I do know in high schools, for example, for a while, they have these health classes where they touch upon, sexual activity and types of protection and so on and so forth. But, this issue with our kids really troubles me because they should never be part of a discussion that's anything less than positive. They're entitled to this. This country, we are so misguided today. And I tell you, I observed what's gone on in Loudoun County with school administrators. I'm trying to figure out who the hell you think you are, that you would not at least extend the courtesy to the parent, right? What you're thinking about teaching the kids if it's something other than what we've traditionally taught them. Reading, writing, arithmetic, history, biology. All of a sudden, we want to raise your kids for you. You got to make your
Right.
mind up. Half the time, they don't want to be involved with the children because they're fearful of losing their jobs and being sued if you emotionally harm some people. But you're potentially emotionally harming these children with your agenda, all of which is attached to politics. To go off on another tangent for you, Claire, this whole discussion about the virus, right? This COVID virus. Instead of us galvanizing our efforts in this country and putting our differences aside, we had a political party who decided to weaponize it. And it wasn't the Republicans. And by the way, I'm not anti-Democrat. I'm just telling you the truth. I listened to the president and Kamala Harris both say they wanted nothing to do with the Trump vaccine, as if Trump was in the back room conjuring up some potion. That started the divide. And then it shifted to the Trump people not wanting to get the vaccine because suddenly the Democratic government's involved and they're mandating it. There's a lot of discussion here that we needed cool heads to prevail, which didn't happen. What's interesting about what you brought up earlier, one of the first points you made was about how we're being saturated with the Ukraine, which is absolutely egregious and it should be addressed, but we're not addressing it. We're giving it a lot of lip service. We got to step up to the plate and provide him the resources that will rattle Putin's cage. And I just want to tell everyone something about Putin. He doesn't have this indiscriminate authority to start pressing buttons. That's not how it goes. And I want to say something else. He has rattled the cage of many oligarchs and many people in his country. I would suspect there's probably a bounty on this guy's head, even though it's not spoken to. I think people have had enough of the crazy with this man. There's a whole lot of implications here. And one thing I want people to be clear about is that this isn't the Russian people. This is one person who's been able to maintain leadership of this country, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Lloyd, of about 22 years. I mean, who needs to control a country like this? But the interesting part about this? It all intersects in this area. It's about our children, their future. We are threatening, interfering, harming, and undermining the best interests and welfare of our children every step of the way, whether it's how we enter them into collegiate environments, what they're taught in collegiate environments. Just for the record, Claire, I'm an academic by background. I went to 16 years of Catholic school. I graduated St. John's University in New York. Don't get the wrong idea. I wasn't Sammy the student either. I did it by the seat of my drawers. No, I'm being honest. I majored in philosophy. I had enough credits for a minor in political science. I think I had 21 credits. But my education started when I got out of school. I think that you hear that expression, you're a student of life. That's what I became. And this whole broadcast is about problem solving and addressing issues and concerns like you've expressed here. This issue about kids going into the academic environment. I don't think it's fair that they have one source of testing. I'm going back to the first question again, so bear with me as I'm bouncing like a basketball and use an SAT or a ACT as the governing decision as to whether or not a child gets into an academic environment. I think a GPA, how hard a child works in that environment, is critically important. There are some children that are just good test takers, period, end of discussion. It's big, the thing about this, Claire, is that we need to continue to have a conversation about this. And as I always remind everyone, independent of what we're doing today, let's try to maintain civility, decency, and respect for one another. I bounced around with you a little bit with this whole thing with children. The thing that's really alarming me is that we've put them in the middle of this mask discussion. Suddenly pre-Kers in the city of New York are the only ones that have to wear masks. I've yet to hear the science that supports that. These are children in developmental stages. They take everything in, unfiltered. The key is not to confuse them any more than we have to, or put them in the middle of our politics, which is what it seems like we've done here. I don't understand how we got so far off track in this country. We can't seem to address any issue in a truthful, responsible manner, whether it's the borders, the condition of our cities, the economy, the price of gasoline. We listened to the president explain to you that Putin is the reason you have high gas prices. No, it's not. You shut down the Keystone Pipeline. And they're talking about shutting the one in Michigan down, the line 5. And the economy, the reason you have inflation is not because of Putin. And if you really understand the backstory to this, the president's basically alluding that we have put into power or position an individual adversarial in nature that could harm our economy and potentially compromise our infrastructure, which translates to our national security. You're probably sorry you called in.
There's a lot to talk about, Lou.
You have no idea. And, and I'm trying to cover the basis with everyone and really try to get people to get on the same sheet of music and not listen to me, be spoon-fed, not listen to any of these media outlets. Go out and open your eyes, independent of your politics, your loyalties. Love your children more you love than your political agenda, and hopefully we're going to get to a much better place. So I'm going to take a quick break, and I'm going to come back to you. I'm going to give you the final word, Claire. We'll be right back, guys. This is Between the Lines.
Okay, thanks.
Instacart, another interesting concept. You can go to your favorite grocery stores, sign on to their application without leaving your home, the comfort of your home. Just pick out the items you'd like. They'll assign a personal shopper for you and deliver them to the point that you would like them delivered to. Another great concept, very user-friendly, and I'll be honest, we use it also. It's very effective, and they're very, very good. They're very on point. We are back. I have with me a young lady from Wichita, Kansas. Interesting history there, by the way, especially back during the late 1800s. Claire, and she's listened to me kind of ramble a little bit, so I want to afford you the opportunity to ask another question or an observation, perhaps, Claire. I yield the floor to you, my dear.
Well, I did have a question about something you said earlier, Lou. Are pre-K kids still wearing masks in New York City? I was not aware of that.
That is
wow.
correct. I'm trying to understand the logic, because you can now go into Madison Square Garden, you can go into any restaurant, any venue, right? You can play pro sports. You don't have to be inoculated any longer. But our pre-Ks are, I think that's how we refer to them, because I never went to kindergarten, believe it or not. I just went right into the first grade. They're required to wear masks, and I'm trying to garner the value or what they're trying to tell us. I have to say something else to you, Claire, that I think you got to really understand is the core of this problem. Stick with me, Mom. You ready?
Ready.
Why would we put our children in an environment that was potentially so harmful to them that they need to wear a mask to be protected? Duh. Why would we do this? If this environment was so potentially harmful, my kid wouldn't be in there. Mask, no mask, an oxygen tank. I don't care what it is. I mean, do you hear what I just said, and do you agree with that?
I just can't believe that, they only have pre-K kids wearing masks. I don't understand the thinking behind that when everyone else isn't going maskless. That does not make sense to me at all.
And Anthony Fauci, who suddenly left the radar screen the past month courtesy of this invasion in the Ukraine, is nowhere to be found to explain this, or any scientists. What happened with this whole virus, as with many things, we should have allowed science to speak to this, not our elected officials who put a spin on everything every time they want to. This is just incomprehensible that they who live in a cocoon don't understand what they're doing to this country as a whole. We are at the point where we don't trust our government. The Democrats don't trust the Republicans. The Republicans don't trust the Democrats. Neither one of them probably trust the government, depending on who's in office. In fact, if you watch the way this administration's going, he's losing not only independents, but he's losing Democrats because they're losing faith in him and this entire cabinet of his that can't seem to get out of their own way or put a sentence together that makes sense. I mean, and I'm not trying to be critical of them. I'm telling you factually that when they ask the vice president a question, she almost answers in a riddle. I heard Buttigieg do the same thing. By the time, and I'm a fairly intelligent guy with a pretty high IQ. Most people wouldn't know that because I act like a thug a lot of times. But independent of that, the reality of it is that he answers a question. I can't figure out what he said after he said it. You know, a lot of people are operating out of our wheelhouse is what I call it. You know, and I understand how Joe Biden became the president. Of all of the Democratic candidates on the platform, he was the most likable. So we propped him up against the Antichrist, Donald Trump. Donald Trump has to take responsibility for his lack of discretion. The man insulted everybody on the planet, including the Pope. You got to take responsibility. Independent of that, and it's irrefutable, he did many good things for this country. One thing he did do was secure it, which that's gone to hell in a handbasket. And I could take you on a tangent about the borders, and I'll save you the pain. But you know, the bottom line is the country's in disarray. We're in a crisis. We're becoming more and more unstable every day because of the divide. And my prediction is we could see secession again in this country. All of these states like Texas and Florida and Nevada and other states that have autonomy in their finances, you know, their budgets, doesn't need the federal government to come in and tell them how to run their state. This guy in Florida, you should take a close look at this guy. He's the goods. I don't remember the last person I've heard in politics that is as sharp as this young man is. He's only about 42 years old. He's a Naval Academy graduate. He was a lieutenant commander in the Navy. He was apparently some form of an advisor to our special ops guys or SEAL teams. He's been running the state with common sense, logic, and reason. And I know he's been quantified or defined as a Republican. He's really just a great leader. And I think he's got an open ear, which is critically important, Claire, in any of these discussions, which seems to lack with everybody across the aisle. I mean, they just don't want to hear what anybody else says. And sadly, the Democratic Party contained therein has its own group that is just tone deaf to the rest of the party because they're trying to push an agenda that has nothing to do with the welfare of this country. You know, I spoke to someone about the borders, Claire, and I don't want to bore you with this, but what's going on at the borders. Whoever's the architect of this need to understand this word called treason. When you engage in an activity that so threatens the national security of this country, that's a treasonous act. And I got bad news for everybody. I hope when the Republicans come in, they don't do what they normally do, which is borderline nothing. But they better hope they don't move to have him impeached and charged with treason. Because what's going on at the borders is irrefutable. They can sugarcoat it with Mayorkas and the rest of these knuckleheads that go down there and try to tell you there's no crisis. We're in trouble there. The drug cartels are overrunning us. They're flooding this country with fentanyl, among other things. We are wading through the Rio Grande River as you and I are on the phone, okay? They allude to as many as 2 million people, Claire, coming into this country. What about those you can't account for? Most of them are not being vetted properly for one very simple reason, Claire. You're a mom, you should care. We don't have the resources to vet them. There's only 800,000 law enforcement agents in a country of 335 million. Who's doing this vetting? This is just inexcusable. And I hate to be suspect because I don't like politics. But if the Democratic Party is hell-bent on changing the voting demographic, everybody better wake up, including the people crossing the border, because the Democrats don't care about them, just like they don't care about the black community. Claire, I got to wrap, and I thank you for calling. I hope you call in on a more regular basis, and I hope I didn't bore you.
You know, that's why I listen to your podcast, Lou. I just love hearing everything you have to say about things.
I appreciate that, and I encourage you to call back in, Claire. Thank you so much for calling today.
Thanks, Lou. Have a good one.
You're welcome, my dear.
Bye-bye.
Are we going to a break? We're going to a break, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be right back. So let me tell you a little bit about Buzzsprout. Very interesting concept. Basically, it allows you to set up your own podcast. One of the most advantageous things about using Buzzsprout is it's user-friendly. So I encourage you highly, if your inclination is to create your own podcast, please look into Buzzsprout. And by the way, we use it. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. And interestingly enough, one of the producers on this show, Lloyd, has a question for me. So I'm curious to hear what that might be.
Well, hey, Lou, my mom said there's nothing good that happens after midnight, which we could debate over and over again. But there was a shooting over the weekend in Sacramento. Can you walk us through what happened there? And I see that Biden has immediately jumped on this as a gun control issue.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Well, to be very candid with you, they've been very tight-lipped in disseminating information surrounding this incident. We do know there were multiple shooters. We do know there were a lot of victims, between those that are deceased, I think 6, and quite a number who were injured. My instincts tell me this is gang-related. You know, they have apparently taken into custody one individual and charged him. They're investigating him, and he's a suspect, but they've already charged him with the possession issue with weapons. As usual, instead of trying to problem solve, we've decided to politicize this and mislead the public into thinking this is a gun control issue. This is a cultural issue. This is a cultural issue. This whole issue about gang activity is their culture, okay? We need to go after it. We have plenty of laws on the books regarding guns. Trust me. What we need is enforcement. I go back and tell you, you know, you've been working on defunding the police. You've demotivated them. There's nothing in it for them to stick their necks out. You're prepared to take their pensions, destabilize their families economically, and even incarcerate them and take them from their families. What it would ever make you think they're going to step up to the plate for you? I don't know if people get up in the morning and take a stupid pill, but you got to start thinking clearly and understand what you're listening to, what you're looking at. So to go back to this discussion or this topic, Lloyd, they're still a little tight-lipped. I do think there's an investigation underway. They're being very, very tight-lipped about dissemination of information. People are knocking on the door of the mayor of Sacramento and its police chief wanting to know what exactly did happen here. But this is nothing that's unusual. This was gang activity. I can't tell you that with certitude, but I would pretty much bet a lot that it is gang activity, especially as a result of the indiscreet manner in which these weapons were employed. Also supported by the fact we had 2 shooters. I think, and it's not out of the question, it couldn't be a terrorist act, but if it was, the FBI would be involved in it already, and we would know they were involved in it, among other agencies on a federal level. As far as the gun control issue, you know, I hate to break it to everyone in this country, and this is why we need to get in the real world with me if you can. The low, legitimate, responsible estimate of weapons in this country is about 500 million. The ATF alluded to $1 billion. I want to inform everybody else of something else. I said inform. I want to inform everyone else of something. We have now 24 states in this country, Indiana becoming the most recent, to have what we call constitutional carry, which allows you to carry a concealed weapon without a permitting process, simply based on the Second Amendment of the Constitution. Oh, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, in Florida, it's highly likely it's going to hit the state legislature in May. They're going to probably enact the law under constitutional carry here. Also entertaining it to start, Utah, South Carolina. Please try to pay attention and bounce with the ball. We're not having gun control. We need some form of responsible management of firearms when they're in the hands of the public. Stop threatening the public that you're going to punish them because of the illegal acts of the people you failed to pursue, right? We lock them up, we let them go, redundantly. Bank robberies, I'm not kidding you. Serious violent assaults, burglaries, forget these thefts, these lootings, literally, of these high-end stores, which is taking place all over the country. We have plenty of laws. Try enforcing a few of them here and there. Try to stop this practice of reclassification or omitting little elements during the commission of a crime, like a gun was used, which changed the sentencing guidelines. This is more smoking. This is more of why we don't get anywhere, because instead of both sides of this aisle sitting down and trying to tackle this problem and get a handle on it, which a lot of it includes enforcement, we sit there and continue to politicize this at the expense of the government, of the public, excuse me. So as far as the president goes, you can ramble on all you want about gun control. It ain't happening. I hate to say it to you. You can come in and challenge me if you like. It isn't going to happen. Let's go to the next best option. Let's educate the public. Let's properly vet them. Let's mandatorily train them, right? Let's teach them the law so they understand the boundaries in which you may use a deadly weapon, which is what a firearm is, by the way. I don't know what to say to the government anymore. They just beat the same damn drum. They beat it during the election cycle in the primaries. They beat it during the debates during the actual presidential election. And how many gun laws have you seen enacted since Biden got into office? Oh, let me wave it for you in case they can't see it. ungats, which means nothing, none. So keep talking about gun laws and avoid fixing the problem. The problem lies with enforcement. Re-empower your police. I got it. We have tools now to account for everything you do during the course of the day. Whether you come out with your hat on, your teeth are brushed, I don't know what to say. We got this technology. It's hamstringing law enforcement, and it's making them pull back. They're not going to risk themselves for a society that's abandoned them. And you know what it comes down to, if you really want to know? I think the majority of America supports law enforcement. I think it's a microcosm of this population that has a problem with law enforcement. And that's the criminal element, usually within the minority community. So everybody's clear on this issue. Most of the minority community are good people. They're just trying to get through the day and keep their kids alive. It's a microcosm of that population that stains it. That's the truth. You know what we lack? We lack courage. Everybody needs to step away from their comfort zone and be heard. And don't worry about being called a racist or insensitive or being weak, the woke, the whacked. I don't even know where to start with this. I wish somebody would cancel me so I could really introduce them to that concept. It would go a step or two beyond you trying to cancel me. You know, I don't know how to respond to this issue. I do want to say one thing about the inner cities. The inner cities are only going to be taken back when the political resolve is in place in these cities, and they let the cops go out and take the cities back. Tragically, it may be by force because of how decayed we are. I do want to say something else to you now that you got me going here, Lloyd. I blame you for this, Lloyd. Every time our elected officials in Washington, D.C.'s knees knock a little bit, we're putting up chain link fence and bringing in the National Guard. How about you deploy the National Guard to all the major cities, saturated with law enforcement and the National Guard, so that you can't walk out on these streets with a weapon without some form of consequence? There's no consequences. By the way, there's no boundaries. No boundaries, no consequences. You have disorder and mayhem. You know, maybe what we need to start to do is in every major city impose a curfew. Let's start 10 o'clock, for example, and play flat out simple. Anybody who violates the curfew, you are challenged. We're not going to say we're going to run over you, but we're going to have the right to confront you to see what it is you're doing in the street, because you may have legitimate need to be out there. But if you're packing a gun, we need to go after that. I know this whole issue with stop and frisk is very sensitive. Unfortunately, it's what we call a necessary evil, because look at the byproduct once we abandon that tactic. And maybe I'm going to keep an open mind. Maybe the cops weren't quite judicious in exercising this whole stop and frisk mechanism. I'll give the public a little ground. We'll come back. We just don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. You come back in and you put in a modified approach. I don't know if that's what's going on in New York City right now with the mayor there, but you know, we have some form of this stop and frisk. We just relabeled it. It's like semantics. You know, maybe we can trick you by calling it something different. We're out chasing guns in the street. That's what cops should be doing. And as we did in the early 90s under the administration of Bill Bratton's police commission, right? He got the guns off the streets pretty quick. He brought the homicides under 2,500 to under 500 in a matter of 2 years. These tactics, they work. Broken windows, quality of life, zero tolerance. We have none of this in the United States and its major cities. Are we prepared to just throw our hands up and leave the cities? That's what people are doing, by the way. They're saying in the state of Florida, they're coming down 1,000 a day. They're saying the state of California has a record number of people leaving for a myriad of reasons. One of it has to do with it's no longer cost effective to live there. The highest price of gasoline in the country, I believe, is on the West Coast. By the way, they're pumping it off the coast of Santa Barbara and other places just to really make you laugh. They're pumping oil in, and then they're paying the most amount of money. I've seen it as high as $7.11 in L.A., $6.95 in Beverly Hills. I can't connect the dots on this one. But you know what the fallout is? People are leaving. Can't afford to live there, work there, own a business. You can't afford to put gas there. You know, I love this economy we're living with right now. The ripple of it is impacting the middle class and the poor. The poor are already, backed against the wall. They don't need any more help. The middle class is going to eliminate their disposable income. Period. End of discussion. In reference to this whole issue in Sacramento, we have to allow them to conduct the investigation At times, it is important to maintain the integrity of an investigation, not to talk too much. The FBI is very, very good at that. They don't give a lot of information. They go out, they target the investigation. They usually come to an excellent conclusion. I always kid people and say, it isn't if they get you, it's when they get you. We could.
Lou, I have a quick follow-up for you.
Go ahead.
on the right to bear arms. I mean, the people in the Ukraine must feel blessed. I mean, they're not in a great situation, but at least they have the right to bear arms and fight back. I mean, do you think that bolsters the right to bear arms strength here in the United States? That
absolutely,
point
Lloyd.
To that?
Absolutely, Lloyd. And I've spoken to this before. We have a little bit of contradiction in terms here now, folks. We are feeding on a daily basis firearms into the country of the Ukraine to arm the populace, right? If you go back and review the Second Amendment of the Constitution, the Founding Fathers expressed concern regarding tyranny, governmental, ours or others, and foreign invaders, which, by the way, after 1776, Great Britain made another run at us in 1812 and burnt our White House. That's a foreign invader, by the way. That's the concern. That's the sensitivity. So I'm now trying to figure out how the government is going to talk about gun control when we're arming a populace in a foreign country, a European nation. Isn't what good for the goose, good for the gander apply here? And do they think the American public is that stupid? They just bolstered the argument of every individual in this country that wants to own an assault rifle because of fear of foreign invader, fear of tyranny. And I tell you something else, ladies and gentlemen. I worked in Europe armed. I worked in South America armed. They disarmed. I'm not quite sure about South America, but they disarmed Europe. And oftentimes the people sit there waiting to be prey of people who have terrorist agendas. That's happening in sporting venues, restaurants. It's happened and happened and happened. Paris and France has had a number of these issues. As far as the Ukraine goes, suddenly we're distributing guns to them. They didn't have guns before. By the way, I'm just telling you, they did not arm their populace. Now they suddenly realize the value that every man counts in something similar to what's going on with Putin in the Ukraine. I don't know how you're going to go back to the American people after we have armed an entire country with M4s, assault rifles that are used in our mass shootings, even though it's only 2% or less, and tell us we can't have them. Guys, we're going to be right back. We're going to take a break. Lloyd brought up very good topics here to discuss, and I know I go off tangentially on you because these things all intersect. They intersect with the craziness that's going on in this country, the lack of honor and integrity and truthfulness that we're not applying to these discussions. We'll be right back, guys. We're back, guys, and we're going to go to an email. Bill, who is sitting in St. Louis, asked me the following. He said, Joe Biden has called for the prosecution of Putin for war crimes after the discovery of mass graves and bodies of bound civilians shot at close range in Bucha, Ukraine. Is this posturing by Biden? Because never in a million years will Putin ever stand trial. Putin couldn't probably care less and is scoffing at these accusations. I don't think it's posturing. I think that the globe is hell-bent on holding him accountable. I think it's important that the president speaks to this, and it reassures not just this country, but every free nation in this world that they intend on pursuing Putin for what he has done there. It is just indescribable what an animal he really is. And I do want to say something to everyone, and I'm just using, again, instincts. He's going to pay for this. One way or the other, he is going to pay for this because he's offended everyone on this planet, including his own people. The interesting thing with this discussion, not to go off on another tangent, but it's interesting to watch that China has not made a move on Taiwan. I wonder if China's observed the fallout of Putin invading this country, realizing how it galvanized every free nation on the planet against Putin. And do they want to incur that? And do they want to incur the sanctions? China's economy isn't exactly 100% right now itself. We do know this country has gotten into an overdependency in foreign entities to support our infrastructure, our productivity, whether it's a car or a piece of string for that matter. Everything's coming out of China or foreign countries, Taiwan, Vietnam, South Korea. We have to get away from this, by the way, and I hate to say this, but I want to give Trump credit where it's deserved. He addressed this issue of manufacturing being brought back into this country. Look at the quagmire it's caused us in just trying to get a car. You can't get cars because we don't make chips. We outsourced it. to speak to you a little more intelligently about this. This started during Nixon's administration with Kissinger at the helm, nurturing China into this global economy routine, which has come back to bite us brutally. As far as Putin goes in war crimes, eventually we will catch up with him. I don't think that the president was posturing. I don't know anyone that I've spoken to that isn't just grossly offended by what's gone on in the Ukraine. But I want to say this to you also. We're going after this with one hand tied behind our back because we're worried he might play with a nuclear weapon. As Macron said in France, we have him too. And if that's the direction you want to take this, and again, I don't think he has the indiscriminate ability to start to deploy nuclear devices. I am certain the hierarchy in his military are scratching their heads in bewilderment. If any of you listened to Taras Kuzio last week referencing the eating accommodations and equipment that's being supplied to the Russian military, there's some problems in paradise here. And I suspect that this is going to implode on him much the same way it did with Hitler. So, guys, if you give me a second, we're going to go to a quick break, and I want to come back and I want to tap onto another really interesting question from a young lady from Santa Cruz regarding Hunter Biden. We'll be right back. We're back, ladies and gentlemen. As I mentioned, Grace from Santa Cruz, California is asking me the following. Lou, with your background in security, what are your thoughts that the Secret Service is reported to be paying $30,000 a month to rent a Malibu mansion with an ocean view to keep a watch on Hunter Biden? Is this the best way to spend our tax dollars? There has to be a certain alternative. And she asks, right, is that correct? Well, the answer is yes. To speak to this so you understand, the president's children are entitled to Secret Service. I would never deny Hunter Biden, regardless of his personal indiscretions and perhaps his bad business deals, the right to protection under what's afforded to him by our government. But normally, ladies and gentlemen, that is somewhat like you get 2 security agents plus what we call an advanced person, unless there's some form of intel that really mandates that you have a more robust security detail. The solution to this is quite simple. After you supply him the 2 agents, he might normally be supplied an advanced person, which is a lot for his son. But I'll give him that much. You pay for the rest. You go into your pocket and you pay for the rest. It's that simple. Hillary Clinton does the same thing, by the way. She travels around in a black van with a pretty extensive security detail that I have observed to be more than the former President Clinton, Bill Clinton. It's really just ironic. And I don't want to deny Mrs. Clinton protection from the government. She's entitled to it according to the way the government is structured. But anything beyond 2 agents assigned to her, an advanced person, she should be paying for, not the taxpayers. So there is a solution to this. There is an alternative. Ask them to reimburse the government for anything beyond what is normal or reasonable, period. This isn't a heavy lift or a heavy conversation. To stay on Hunter Biden for 1 second, none of us should be concerned about his personal life. I don't care about what he does, videotaping himself with women, smoking crack. I really don't care. I don't really care about people's personal lives. What we do need to do, what the American public is entitled to know, unequivocally, is his involvement in the Ukraine with Burisma, his involvement in Russia with a mayor's wife who supposedly, and this has been verified, gave him millions of dollars. His relationships in China. All of these things intersect with the credibility and potentially the compromising of our government. The sad part is we can't get a straight answer here, a straight, truthful answer. The president, like them all, they all have a problem with this word called veracity, all of them. I know he doesn't want to indict himself. I suspect he might not have to worry about that the way this is going with the Department of Justice and the FBI. They're going to convene a grand jury. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And I'm going to be shocked if there isn't indictments passed down. I feel for the president. This is his son. Okay, guys, don't allow your personal feelings towards Joe Biden or his administration commingle with the fact this is your son. It's tough to watch your children trip and fall like this. I don't know what to say about that. I just feel for the president in that regard. I'm sure if he had his choice his son would have not gone down a lot of the paths that he's gone down in his life. But you know what? He's a big boy. He did what he wanted to do. Now he may have his day of atonement. They keep making reference to something else in all of these communications. The big guy. You know, I don't think the public is that stupid that they don't understand who the big guy is. You know, tragically, this took place during the Obama administration, in which Joe Biden was the vice president. You know, not only does Joe Biden have his fingerprints on what his son did, but so does Obama, because he's supposed to know everything going on under his roof. It's the same way it is in a police department. Somehow the inspector in a command is supposed to know what the cops are doing in the street every single day. And if they do something wrong, he pays the price for it. It's the tone he sets. It's hard for me to imagine that Obama did not know Hunter Biden. He's had to have met him, understood this kid is quite troubled. How could he not know what was going on in these foreign countries? He's the president of the United States. So this is going to get interesting. We have another issue in the Biden family dealing with his brother Jim. Apparently, he's been involved in some of these perceptively convoluted dealings. What everybody really has to understand is parts of the media who are favorable to the Democratic Party and Obama and Biden have finally come to their senses and stopped negating the authenticity of this laptop. CNN, for example, the New York Times, the Washington Post, they're all starting to realize with this smoke, we got a hell of a fire going on. And now this is about damage control. The question once again is going to be, are there going to be any boundaries or consequences that are going to be imposed? You know, I don't want to go back to Will Smith because we're living in a society where there's no punitive action when you cross these boundaries. I hope that isn't the case with Hunter Biden. We're witnessing it right now, by the way, with Will Smith. For everyone to understand, he withdrew from the Academy, which means he can't vote on who may get an Academy Award. That's what he considers to be punishment. We're in trouble in this country. We need to get the vector back on course and reinfuse some integrity into this process. Guys, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. It's Between the Lines. We're back, ladies and gentlemen. It's Carrie from Minnesota. She's asking me the following. Europe is planning to cut deeper into the Russian economy with a new round of sanctions that includes a ban on coal imports. It's also working on sanctions that could target Russian oil. Hitting Russia in the pocketbook doesn't hurt Putin, but the people of Russia will suffer if its economy suffers. Is this the answer? Well, you know, this is the thing, very quickly. You're right in that observation. The Russian people are paying for his indiscretion. There's going to be some form of accountability with oligarchs because they're also feeling these sanctions. Tragically, I do not believe that Putin gives a good damn about the Russian people, because if he did, he would have thought out of the box and realized the implication, because they've been rattling this saber about sanctions for a long time. And not to go off on a tangent, but the minute he started to amass 70,000 troops on the Ukraine border, we should have started to insert a massive amount of resources and assets to offset that invasion. I hope that answers the question. It's not a real complicated one. The people in Russia will pay for this indiscretion. We'll be right back. My name is Lou Palumbo. This has been Between the Lines. You've been listening to me speak to a myriad of topics. They all intersect, interestingly enough. They intersect with the future of our children. Truthfully, the future of this nation. And at the rate we're speaking, you know, possibly the planet. We need to bring some integrity back to this process. We need to simplify things. Tell the truth. Let the chips fall where they may. There's plenty of forgiveness. My position is very simple. I don't care you made a mistake. I hope it wasn't with intent and with malice. But even with that being said, we need to learn from that and push forward. That's what we're not doing. We're sitting here bantering with each other, ridiculing each other, and demeaning each other. And nothing good comes out of it. And by the way, our kids are watching. Hope to see you next week.
Perfect.